Hi, this is Cynthia Seymour, and we are Virtual Newsmakers. I'm here today with my co-host Debbie, and we are featuring Aliza Sherman and Danielle Smith today. They are the authors of Social Media Engagement for Dummies and Mom Inc. Both of them I have on my iPad and are fabulous books. So anyway, I want to just say hi to everybody, introduce everyone. Aliza, welcome to our show. Danielle.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Thank you.
I'm excited to have you.
Oh, one quick thing. Mom Incorporated.
Mom
Not
Incorporated.
Which is a different book.
Oh,
Mom
okay, good.
Incorporated.
Thank you for that heads up. I have on my iPad and are fabulous books. So anyway, I'd like to just say hello, and I'd like to ask you all to share with us how y'all met and what inspired you to get started together on this project.
Sure. I actually have a quick question.
Yes.
Does somebody not have their headset on?
I'm hearing it as well.
Yes,
I'm hearing it too.
Yeah,
I've got my headset on, so I don't.
I'm hearing this. It's almost like a delayed broadcast.
Right.
Oh, okay. I think it stopped. So, all right, diving back in, how did we meet? All right.
Yeah.
I'll start the story, and then Danielle has her portion of the story, if that's okay.
Right.
Sure.
So, I used to see Danielle at different conferences and events. Our paths crossed a little bit. We spoke a little bit, but I was working on my 8th book, crowdsourcing. Complete Idiot's Guide to Crowdsourcing. Finished that, and then I was approached by another publisher, Sellers Publishing, about writing a book. And we brainstormed ideas and came up with the idea of Mom Incorporated. I happened to have reserved momincorporated.com years ago as a domain name, and I thought telling the story of starting a business from home would be interesting and helpful. So I was brain dead from writing my other book and asked, is it possible for me to have a co-author? So I thought, who do I know who writes really well, has a warm voice, and truly understands what it's like to be a mom with a business? And I thought of Danielle. So I emailed her.
Very nice, Danielle. And when she emailed you, what was your initial response?
You know, it's funny. Aliza and I always love to sort of tag team the story because we had met just a couple of times at conferences, and so it really was that virtual connection. And it was a message through Facebook, and it literally said, do you have a book deal, and if you don't, do you want one? And as someone who has always had a passion for writing and has always sort of had on my, for lack of a better phrase, bucket list that I wanted to write a book, it came through at that moment that I thought, really? Does it really happen like this? And so I messaged her back very quickly with a, no, I don't, yes, I do. And then proceeded to refresh my Facebook like she wasn't joking, right? Did she really mean it? And she responded, and we just had this beautiful collaboration. And when Aliza says that I added a warmth to the book, our styles are so different, and it wasn't until we actually had the opportunity to go on book tour together that we realized that our spirits are so alike, but our style is so different. So Aliza has a very intelligent, witty, business-structured style, and my style is far more free-flowing and conversational. So we would trade off chapters. She would write one chapter, I would write the other, and then we would give them to each other. And then she would straighten me out, and I would soften her up a little bit. So she'd make sure that I got rid of all of my ellipses in my chapters, and then I would add a few anecdotes into hers. Our voices really melded throughout the book, and it gave a full feel. So you have a taste of both of us, but if you know us at all, especially with Mom Incorporated, when you're reading the book, you can pick out who wrote which chapters, but you do, especially when you listen to us speak in person, you have a good feel for our yin and yang, how we finish each other's sentences, and how you do get a full feel for the two of us.
I'm laughing a little bit because Debbie and I have that same experience with each other, so that's why I'm totally amused. Anyway, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say that we did try to blend our voices, And I think Danielle tells a story a little bit too of her husband reading it, and one of the biggest compliments he gave her was, I couldn't always tell which was yours. That we were able to blend, and yet, frankly, I mean, we can tell. We can definitely tell, and we do have very distinct voices and styles. In fact, I always let everyone know that whenever I show up at book appearances with Danielle, and I'm looking like totally accessorized, she's also my style and image consultant.
I can relate to that.
Aliza and I had a lot of fun when we were on book tour. You know, I showed her how to wear high heels for the first time. And just because I've always been a fancy personality, I suppose. And so I would bring high heels and she'd say, you can walk in those? And I'd say, you can't. And so we would have fun in our hotel room because we shared hotel rooms throughout book tour. And so we would joke around and I'd be like, come on, walk in that. Come on. And so we've always had a lot of fun together.
That's awesome.
So when was the first time you met in person? Because Danielle, you're in Missouri,
right.
And Aliza, you're in Yuma, Arizona. So when's the first time you guys met in person?
Well, I remember one meeting, but I don't know what Danielle remembers. I remember her sitting outside a ballroom at a conference. I think it must have been Type A Mom in Asheville, one of the first ones that Type A moms that I had attended, and now it's called Type A Parent. And she was wearing this bright red dress, like a really nice red dress, and great shoes, and perfect hair, and I just looked at her and I said, oh, wow. And she's so nice. That's what I remember, is that she looked stunning, and then she was so approachable and so genuinely friendly. And that's the personality that also comes across online, I believe, with her. And that was my first. But the thing is, I think that there's another story that I don't remember because I have no memory.
Well, I know that we also met at Blogger because one of Aliza's biggest clients is the Wine Sisterhood. And Aliza had reached out to me because she was throwing small wine parties via Wine Sisterhood. And she reached out to me at Blogger in San Diego, which would have been 3-4 years ago, and said, would you throw a small wine party in your room? And, for just some of your close friends, just sort of a in-between events, at the end of the day, before everyone heads out for the night, just a tasting of some of the Wine Sisterhood's wines. And Aliza came into the room, and one of the things that was always well known about Aliza is she would always wear a tiara and a boa. And that was, one of the very first pictures I have of Aliza and I is her in her pink boa and her tiara, and me just in my standard dress. And so she's, that was her fancy. But I have that picture. But I feel as though that was the first time we met, but we might have met at Type A. Type A might have preceded that blog.
I think Type A is where we said hello, and then that's why I remembered you when I was looking for women who might enjoy trying some of Wine Sisterhood wines. So I think that you're right, that is the first time we actually hung out and spoke, and other than emailing back and forth before that.
Right.
So when you were collaborating on the book, when you were collaborating on the book, when was the first time you guys got together on the book? Because you obviously are in different cities, so the collaboration of the book, so you would obviously use email and...
we did everything virtually with the book.
Everything
with the book was virtual until we went on book tour, until the book was done. I mean, everything was Google documents and Word documents and Skype calls, and because when we were doing Mom Incorporated, Google Plus wasn't a factor.
That's interesting.
So then also our second book together, same thing, completely virtual. We had our rhythm down already from the first book. And the only thing that was really different was the writing process of the book. So the first book, Mom Incorporated, was our ideas, our stories, interviewing 80-plus women and their stories, lots of anecdotal information, as well as really solid business tips and advice and checklists.
Right.
So the second book that we've written together, and there will be a third, what was a little bit harder because they had a very, very specific structure. So Dummy's books, Dummy's series have a very similar structure throughout. So then we had to take all of our ideas and our styles and then swoosh them into the structure. So we did it all virtually again, but it was a lot more challenging because there were many more things that we had to figure out.
I love that Aliza says that it was a little bit harder, when in fact...
we cried.
I cried. I cried. There was, if you read the acknowledgement in the book, there is a section where I say thank you to my husband for sleeping on my floor while I cried, the floor in my office while I cried, and he literally said to me, if you can do this, you can do anything, because I felt at the time that it was truly the most challenging thing I had ever done, fitting myself into a very, very specific box because it was so structured and so formatted. And at times, with Mom Incorporated, we had one editor. And with the Dummies books, we had at times up to six editors in one chapter. And so it was, I mean, it would come to us color coordinated. I mean, one editor was in purple and one was in green and one was in yellow. And so there would be almost conflicting information at times. That, you know, this editor would say, I think you need to change this, and someone else would say, don't you think you need to do this? And I would call Aliza and say, I don't really know what to do with this. I'm not sure. So Aliza really kept me sane through the process, having the experience of so many books under her belt. Whereas with me, you know, it's funny because with our first book, I always said, you know, this is Aliza's 9th book and it's my first. And so now I'm like, this is Aliza's 10th and it's my 2nd. So, you know, we're building up.
Yeah.
So that's kind of an oxymoron. You mentioned the extreme structure of the social media engagement book, but yet social media is probably the least structured entity out there.
You're so right.
How do you translate that over?
Yeah, I would say it a little bit differently, although obviously Danielle agrees. And this is the other thing that's really cool about us is that we have differing enough opinions about things that it creates a really great full picture. But I would say that social media is very fluid. But to succeed well, you need a bit of structure. If you're going to be a corporation out there doing something, you do have to have some framework and some structure. And yet you still need to operate in a fluid way. So just recently I saw some brands who they just 2 tweets a day, one at 9 a.m., one at 4 p.m. And that's all they do. And we need to do a new tweet about something. Okay, which slot can we move? And I'm thinking that's not fluid. So structure but fluidity.
And I think Aliza and I were having this conversation the other day with if you're not fluid and you don't have the ability to go with the flow and to jump in when there is a crisis of sorts. I mean, with jumping in with the idea that people there are so many tools out there that allow us to schedule. But if something happens, I mean, when we talk about the tragedy on Monday, if you've got things scheduled, you need to be smart enough to jump in there and say, I'm turning this off. Because it's not the appropriate time to be promoting your sales, to be promoting your content. You need to change your structure, and you need to be fluid enough to say, oops, need to jump in there. But sometimes people are so structured and they jump into a box because social media needs to be in a framework like this, and that's one of you need to be structured enough that you need to have a plan, but you need to be fluid enough to be malleable enough to change.
Responsive. You need to be responsive. And one of the things that we emphasize a lot is be human. So we really lay out that brands can still be human. There are human beings behind that brand. That human personality has got to come through. And by being human, you can be reactive and responsive, but appropriate for your brand.
Right.
But you've got that human reaction and human touch, which is so essential.
It definitely is, and I think that corporations get into that thinking that it's about the technology. The technology is just the platform. There's the humans behind it, and your book over and over and over again talks about that human quality. How would you help a corporation get comfortable with, or a business get comfortable with just being human online?
Well, I definitely consult companies about this, and the first thing you really want to do, once you've established your brand personality, any guidelines that you need to put forth for legal reasons or just internal corporate culture reasons, is identify your spokespeople. Identify the people with the voice of your company. Eventually, I think companies should be able to feel comfortable for pretty much anyone who has public-facing access to be able to properly, appropriately interact on behalf of the company, but that's daunting. So the biggest thing is figure out who are those people with that voice and allow them to shine through. There's nothing better for a brand than to actually showcase some of the people who work there, some people who are part of the company. I mean, that's that human touch. People like to see people. They don't necessarily want to fully interact with a logo.
Right. Yeah. No, let me ask you this. As a case study of examples of businesses you think that are doing it really great, what would those be?
Oh, Danielle, this is a good one for you.
Gosh, there are so many of them, and this is why, I mean, a lot of times I like to jump to the airlines right away, because I know that those are one of the places that we like to talk when we're out and about. I converse with the airlines, and they're a good gauge for me when I am in the public and I am happy or frustrated or unhappy. And I'm not a complainer, but I will talk and I will gauge whether or not they talk back. I will say, Delta, I'm so bummed I left my Kindle on my flight between St. Louis and LaGuardia last week. I want to know if you're going to respond. And honestly, Delta responds every single time, and they almost always respond within moments. I mean, and it's funny because I will have people say to me, did Delta respond to you? Delta responds, I didn't get my Kindle back. I left it last week. And the chances of me ever getting my Kindle back, and what's so frustrating is my Kindle actually has a sticker on it with my Twitter handle. So whoever has my Kindle actually has my Twitter on it. So it's got my name. So you don't even have to go into the Kindle to figure out who it belongs to. So whoever's using it can get online and watch me complain about the fact that they have it. But Delta went right to me and said, this is the first place to go. I'm going to, while you fill out this form online, I'm checking lost and found. Wow. And they went right to...
You were dealing with a person that felt like a person, and you, okay, great.
And they give me their initials. Every time Delta responds to me, they give me their initials. So they don't sign their name, but they say it's GK or it's WS or it's. So I respond, and what's funny is I checked back 2 days later and I said, was dealing with GK, and we're on a DM at this point, and I said, 3 days ago was talking with GK. They said there wasn't anything turned in at that point. Is there any chance that someone can check for me again? And it was about 10 minutes later, and GK responded again and said, it's GK again. I just checked for you. I'm so sorry there isn't anything yet, but please don't give up hope. And so it was nice. So I get responses both in the public domain, so they are letting me know we're here so that everybody can see, so everyone knows we're responding to you, but we're also going to take it private so that I can do what I can to help you on the back end.
Yeah, that's and JetBlue,
Virgin is wonderful too, but again, a lot of airlines.
Yeah, Southwest. I mean, they are paying attention, and they're actually doing it so well. And you think about it, they've got such a difficult business right now, and the fact that they have put the resources toward this immediate customer service and customer touch.
Well, especially because, quite honestly, a lot of times when you're dealing with airline employees in person, they're not so friendly. I mean, I checked in with Delta, and when I checked in at the kiosk, it asked if I wanted to change my seat. I did. For some reason, I hit, there were two open seats, window and aisle, and I accidentally hit window, and I'm an aisle person. So when I was checking in my luggage, I said, I made a mistake. The aisle seat was open. Is there any chance that I can just, and she went like this, oh, no, the aisle's already been taken. There was no one else checking in at that point, so the very thought that someone miraculously took the aisle in those 45 seconds, no one else was checking in, I knew it was cursory. I knew she didn't check. Yeah. And so I just knew that I had to wait until I got on the flight to prove in my head that she didn't really look. And sure enough, when I got on the flight, the aisle seat wasn't taken, and I was able to just move over. So I tweeted, so funny, Delta. I knew she didn't check. And so they DM'd me and said, do you mind telling me what time you checked in and give me your confirmation number so we can see who it was that checked your luggage in? And they DM'd me that. And so, I mean, they didn't do it publicly, but they DM'd me and said, do you mind? Just so that they can follow up. And they said, they said publicly, we're so sorry you had that experience. And then privately they said, do you mind telling us who that was?
Wow. Powerful.
Right. We have a question coming in from an audience member. From Nazim Beltran, and he's out of Milan, and he deals with high-end web projects in all of Europe, including Princess Cruise Lines. And he is asking regarding outsourcing social media, what are the pros and cons of that? Is that something that you recommend for businesses or not? And why?
Aliza, do you want to start, and then I'll chime in?
Yes, sure. Full disclaimer is that is what I've done for years. As an independent consultant, I've had a social media marketing agency in the past, so I always like to be supportive of those of us who are in this business of consulting, very thoughtful and full holistic approach. So I do believe a good consultant can be very beneficial. For the bottom line, it can be cheaper, but I also think somebody within the company must own social media. Somebody within the company must be empowered to make decisions, to learn, and to be supported in their learning about social media, and to be the point person even if you have a consultant. That consultant should not rule the roost. It has to be internal decisions and internal processes. Eventually, I like to empower my clients to take over as much as they can. Realistically, some of them cannot, so we're there to support them.
That would be for people who don't have time and the resources.
Who don't have time or resources, or it's just not their forte. And so rather than hiring in-house, they're doing something with a partner, a strategic consulting partner. So Danielle, what would you say?
If I may, what I'd like to add to that is I like the idea of there being a hierarchy of someone who has the opportunity to make decisions on the social media realm. If there is the good, the bad, or the ugly, there has to be someone who has the ability to make those decisions in-house. But also there's something extremely powerful about people who are invested in the brand being involved in the social media space, because there's a different level of passion that is associated with the people who own the brand, who live the brand, who breathe the brand, than there is giving it to someone else. And while social media consultants can feel extremely passionate about it, I know one particular firm who makes sure that the consultants that are involved with particular brands are the ones who understand that particular space. So if it is a mom-related brand, she makes sure that there are moms involved with the social media over that particular brand because they understand the brand. So I think that type of consultancy is an important match. But I also think there is something, and Aliza's great with working with the Wine Sisterhood. Aliza understands as a lifestyle the Wine Sisterhood. She lives and she breathes their mantra and their everything that they do. So she is a perfect match for working in their social media space and having been their digital diva and creating everything they do. That being said, I think that it is really important for people who are in that brand space, who are living the brand, to be involved as well.
That's a great answer, actually. Just from the standpoint of if you do outsource it, it needs to be somebody that has a passion for it, lives the lifestyle, and is a fan.
And a lot of mistakes companies make is outsourcing it to agencies and with people that might have the Bachelor of Marketing degree but don't necessarily play in the platform.
Well, and if you can't trying to give I think about a lot of the people who are graduating from school now and trying to pass off who have a social media degree of some sort. You might be putting them in an old school brand. I mean, if you have a 24 or 25-year-old and trying to have them understand a brand that has a market to 30 and 40-year-olds, they might not understand that, and there might be a disconnect. So trying to connect with those customers, they might be giving the wrong messaging. So I think it's really important that the social media consultancy and the brand match up.
Yeah. I totally agree with that. And what happens, the reality is, if you are going for an agency, especially a larger agency, the chances that you're going to get a strategic thinker actually doing is very, very slim. Or it's going to be the entry level who's actually going to be in the middle of it, handling it. And so that's one of the things, if you work with someone on the outside, find out exactly who's going to be helping craft messaging, doing the strategic plan, and then who will be monitoring and interacting along with your team within your online communities and social networks. So that's definitely something, if you work with someone on the outside, know who everyone is who's touching your brand.
That's important.
Yeah, that's brilliant advice, actually. For a millennial, what would you suggest in terms of learning this?
For a millennial to learn the strategic side of it? Because the millennials, I would think, are totally engaged in social media in their own ways.
No, not really. Not all of them.
It's interesting because, I mean, my question for you would be, are there trainings that you would recommend for a millennial to be able to gain the knowledge to be a voice?
Oh, so to be strategic, be strategic with it, because they're comfortable with the idea of social networking and the various platforms and mobile devices and apps and texting, but that doesn't necessarily translate to a strategic approach for a client. Okay, so I mean, yeah, there's all sorts of trainings. In fact, many companies and agencies offer trainings in-house for companies. Our book, by the way, is a Social Media Engagement for Dummies, I think is a good tool for anyone at any level to understand how to match their current knowledge and information with the tools, and then understand the process of social media marketing and engagement. So there's a lot of resources out there.
Yeah. Also, being willing to do the work. I think that there is, and I hate to generalize, but I have encountered a bit lately, and this is, I actually have a friend that speaks on behalf of millennials, and he does consulting for companies on how to hire millennials and how to work with millennials, and it's very interesting to me because there is a generational gap in terms of how I was raised and how I entered the workforce and how people are entering the workforce now. But I think that, to me, one of the gaps that seems to exist is the theory that because they're growing up with the technology, that they have an understanding of the technology as to how it works in the workforce, and I would suggest a willingness to learn some of the strategies that are implemented, or how companies should be using them in terms of best practices. Because the fact that I have my phone and I use it to engage with my friends, or because I've grown up with the technology, doesn't mean I understand necessarily best practices for marketing and engagement. They're not, one is not a given for the other. So yes. I think that the understanding that there is a learning curve there.
Know what you don't know. I mean, right. All of us, we're all, no matter how expert we are, the fact of the matter is the best people out there are the ones who are constantly learning and open. So correct. No matter what your level is, Danielle and I live and breathe this, and every single day I learn something from her. Yeah. We're learning from our peers. I mean, it's a constant learning process. I mean, life is a constant learning process. So be open to that learning. Don't ever think that you know it all.
Because technology is fluid, and half the algorithms on social media platforms have changed probably from the time we've been on the air.
True.
That might be true. It's interesting because I learn from everyone sitting here in this hangout. And so I want to thank everybody for being here. Every week we offer our audience a challenge of the week that will help take them forward in terms of their digital communications. And today we've been talking about social media engagement. If you could challenge people today to do anything this week to move the needle in terms of their social media engagement or working virtually, we've talked about both. What would you challenge them to do? And I'd love to hear from both of you.
Danielle, you want to
Sure.
start?
I would challenge people to take extra time to listen. I think I was looking at a lot of different Twitter. There was a Twitter list that I saw go out today, and I went to a number of different people and looked at some of the people on the list, and I saw that a number of them were broadcasting and not listening as much. I would like to challenge people to do more listening and conversing. Spend more time paying attention and being a part of the conversation rather than just saying, this is what I have to say. Your audience wants you to be part of the conversation, and they want to know that you care what they have to say. If all you do is say, here is a really exceptionally inspirational quote, then your audience doesn't, while they may find a little bit of inspiration in that moment, they don't necessarily know that you're talking to them or that you care that they might respond to you. So take a little bit of extra time to listen and to respond to the people that are in.
That's great advice, actually.
I totally agree with her, and she took one of my ideas because we always finish each other's sentences. So I was going to say something like that, so that's perfect that she did. But I guess the other thing that I would say, which is something I've talked about a lot, is don't get overwhelmed. Don't allow yourself to get overwhelmed, and prioritize so that you can spend really concentrated and focused time while you're interacting, conversing, listening, responding, paying attention. But also take some time to step back. Get offline, shut the computer, put that mobile device away, tuck that smartphone in your bag, and disconnect. Because by by stepping away, you give yourself some breathing room, you give yourself some mental space, and then come back with a fresh mind and take a look. Take a look at, I do this a lot, at my Twitter stream. Is it me just broadcasting? I think sometimes I fall into that trap. And so I now, with this fresh eyes, can look at it and say, okay, I need to rethink how I'm doing this and step up my game in terms of conversing and really connecting with people. And so, but if you don't step back, you're in the thick of it, you're in the weeds, and you're not taking the time you need to properly assess. And this is for businesses too. You have to step back and assess on a regular basis, not just to say, is this worth my money, but am I doing it well? Because if you're not doing it well, the outcomes are not going to be good. But if you are thoughtful and you are constantly improving what you do, then you will get your money's worth.
That's brilliant. Thank you guys both so much. I want to encourage people to take a look at their book. I have mine on Kindle and I love it.
Thank you.
Both Mom Incorporated, and I have both of them actually. Thank you guys so much for joining us today, and we really appreciate you sharing your stories and your tips with us today. And so we're all challenged now to take a little extra time to listen and pay attention and be more conversational, talk directly with people, get offline, live life, and come back with a fresh mind. So anyway, thank you guys so much. This is Virtual Newsmakers, and we will be back on next Friday. With Nazim Beltran, talking about the shifts that are happening in web design and online branding from a European perspective. And if you all like what we're doing, we'd love it if you would subscribe to our YouTube channel, Virtual Newsmakers, and feel free to come in and chat with us, give us ideas about our shows. Thank you so much, and have a great day.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Bye.